For over 2 decades, Maria Loa dedicated her life to what she believed was a sacred calling. Behind the towering walls of a convent, she followed the rules with unwavering devotion, convinced that her sacrifices were bringing her closer to God. But what happens when the very foundation of your faith begins to crack? When the truths you've built your entire life upon suddenly feel like chains instead of wings? Maria's journey is not just about leaving a convent. It's about discovering a truth that had been hidden from her for years. A single verse from the book of Isaiah shattered everything she thought she knew, setting her on a path that would challenge centuries-old traditions and expose her to unimaginable opposition. Today, we'll uncover the powerful story of how one woman risked everything to find the real meaning of faith. Her testimony has changed lives, but it has also made her a target. What she discovered may shake your beliefs as well. Before we dive in, if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an eye-opening story like this. Hit the like button if you support those who seek truth, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do religious institutions have too much control over faith? Let's get into it. Maria Loa never imagined that her life would take such an unexpected turn. From a young age, she was drawn to faith, captivated by the stories of saints who had devoted their lives to God. Raised in a deeply religious family, she saw the convent as the ultimate expression of devotion, a place where she could serve with purity, free from the distractions of the outside world. At just 18, Maria made the decision to enter the convent. It was a moment of both excitement and fear, but she was determined to live a life of holiness. The transition was drastic. She left behind her family, her friends, and the comforts of modern life, trading them for a strict routine of prayer, fasting, and obedience. From the moment she stepped through those heavy doors, she knew that her life would never be the same. The first few years were a mixture of awe and struggle. The convent was peaceful, yet demanding. Days began before sunrise with long hours dedicated to prayer, study, and silence. Maria found comfort in the discipline, believing that each sacrifice brought her closer to God. She was told that suffering was part of the path to holiness, that every hardship was a test of faith. She accepted it all without question until the day a simple passage from the Bible changed everything. One afternoon, Maria was reading from the book of Isaiah when she came across a verse that struck her to the core. They lift it to their shoulders and carry it. They set it in its place, and there it stands. From that spot, it does not move. Though one cries out to it, it does not answer. It cannot save them from their troubles. Isaiah 46:7. The words seemed to leap off the page. She read them again and again. The passage condemned idolatry, something Maria had always been taught to avoid. But as she thought about it, doubts crept into her mind. Hadn't she spent years bowing before statues, lighting candles to saints, and offering prayers to figures made of wood and stone? The realization hit her like a wave. What if the traditions she had followed so faithfully were never part of God's original plan? At first, she pushed the thought away. Questioning the convent's teachings felt like questioning God himself. But the more she tried to suppress her doubts, the stronger they became. Maria began to notice things she had overlooked before. Rules that seemed more focused on control than on faith. Rituals that didn't align with what she was now reading in the Bible. She wasn't alone in her struggle. She had heard whispers of others who had left the convent, but they were always spoken of with disdain. Those who abandoned their vows were considered traitors, lost souls who had given in to the temptations of the world. The thought of leaving terrified her. Where would she go? How would she survive? More importantly, what if she was wrong? Maria decided to pray for clarity. She fasted. She sought guidance, but the more she searched, the more unsettled she felt. She realized that her entire faith had been built on traditions passed down through centuries, but were they truly biblical? One night, Unable to sleep, Maria snuck into the convent's library and began reading books that were not part of their usual studies. She found accounts of early Christianity, descriptions of a faith that was centered on Christ alone, without the weight of rituals and intermediaries. She read about believers who had been persecuted for rejecting man-made doctrines, for insisting that faith was a personal relationship with God, not a system of rules dictated by an institution. The pieces were falling into place. Maria's internal struggle grew unbearable. Every day she felt like she was living a lie. She recited prayers she no longer believed in. She followed routines that felt empty. The once peaceful convent now felt suffocating. She had to make a decision. One evening, Maria overheard a conversation between two senior nuns. They were discussing a woman who had recently left the convent and the danger she now posed. "She's been deceived," one of them said. "People like that lead others astray. They think they've found the truth, but all they're doing is sowing confusion." The words sent a chill down Maria's spine. If she left, this is how they would speak about her too. She would be labeled a lost soul, a rebel. But wasn't searching for truth the very essence of faith? She knew she couldn't stay any longer. If she truly wanted to follow God, she needed to seek Him outside the walls of the convent. But leaving wasn't as simple as walking out the door. The convent was strict. Women who left were often shunned, discouraged from making contact with the outside world. She had no money, no plan, and nowhere to go. Still, she couldn't ignore the conviction growing inside her. She had to find out what was beyond those walls. One night, with nothing but a small bag of personal belongings, Maria made the most terrifying decision of her life. She ran. What happened next would change her forever. If you've ever questioned something you were taught to believe, let us know in the comments. Have you ever felt trapped in a system that no longer made sense to you? We want to hear your thoughts. And if this story has kept you hooked so far, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next part of Maria's incredible journey. Maria had never felt fear like this before. As she slipped out of the convent under the cover of darkness, her heart pounded in her chest. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound sent chills down her spine. She wasn't just leaving behind a way of life, she was stepping into the unknown with nothing but faith to guide her. The moment she passed the gates, an overwhelming sense of both freedom and terror consumed her. She had no idea where to go. The world outside felt foreign, almost unreal, after more than 20 years behind those walls. The last time she had been among ordinary people, she was just a teenager. Now, as an adult, she had no job, no money, and no idea how to survive. Her first instinct was to find a church, somewhere she could seek shelter and answers. But as she walked through the unfamiliar streets, a sinking feeling crept into her mind. Would they welcome her? Or would they send her back? She had seen it happen before. Nuns who had tried to leave, only to be persuaded, guilted, or even forced into returning. As she wandered through the city, she finally spotted a small chapel with its doors still open. Exhausted and unsure of where else to go, she stepped inside. The silence was comforting, but it also carried the weight of uncertainty. She sat down, trying to gather her thoughts, when a voice interrupted her. "Are you all right?" Maria turned to see an older woman, a church worker who had noticed her distress. She hesitated. What could she possibly say? That she had just abandoned the only life she had ever known? That she was beginning to question everything she had believed for decades? Instead, she simply whispered, "I don't know what to do." The woman sat beside her, listening as Maria poured out her story. For the first time, she spoke about the doubts that had been tormenting her. The woman didn't react with shock or condemnation. Instead, she nodded and said something that would stay with Maria forever. Faith is not about where you are. It's about who you trust. The words hit Maria like a revelation. She had spent years believing that her salvation depended on a place, a routine, a system. But what if faith was never meant to be about rituals and rules? What if God was bigger than the convent, bigger than the traditions she had followed so blindly? The woman offered her food and a place to rest for the night. It was the first time in years that Maria felt she could breathe without the weight of expectation crushing her. But she also knew this was only the beginning. She needed answers, and she was determined to find them. Over the next few days, Maria searched for communities where she could learn more about faith outside of the convent's teachings. She found a small group of Christians who welcomed her without judgment. They shared their own stories. Some had been priests, nuns, or members of religious institutions who had come to similar realizations. Through them, Maria began to study the Bible in a way she never had before. She realized that so many of the things she had accepted as divine truth were, in fact, traditions created by humans. She read about how Jesus had confronted religious leaders, challenging them for putting rules above genuine faith. But with every answer she found, more questions arose. If she had been wrong about so much, what else had she misunderstood? What else had she blindly followed without question? As she deepened her understanding, Maria felt an unshakable conviction growing inside her. She needed to share what she had learned. But speaking out would come at a cost. Leaving the convent was one thing, exposing the truth about the things she had witnessed and questioning long-held beliefs was another. She knew that if she spoke publicly, she would face backlash. She had seen others be labeled as traitors, as deceivers. But could she stay silent after discovering what she now knew? Maria wrestled with the decision, praying for guidance. One day, she came across a passage that seemed to answer her doubts. "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8:32. She knew what she had to do. Maria started sharing her testimony online, recording simple videos where she spoke about her journey, her struggles, and what she had learned. At first, she thought only a few people would watch, but within weeks her story spread like wildfire. Messages poured in, some from people who were experiencing the same doubts, others from those who had always felt trapped by religious traditions but had been too afraid to question them. But not all responses were positive. As her story gained attention, Maria became a target. Former members of her convent condemned her, calling her lost, deceived, even dangerous. Some tried to discredit her, while others sent messages urging her to repent and return before it was too late. One day, she received a chilling email. It was anonymous, but the message was clear. "Stop speaking. You are leading people astray. If you continue, there will be consequences." Fear gripped her. Was she putting herself in danger? Should she stop before things escalated? She considered stepping away, but then she remembered the thousands of people who had reached out to her, the ones who had thanked her for giving them the courage to seek the truth for themselves. She thought about all the years she had spent in silence, believing lies simply because she was too afraid to ask questions. No, she wouldn't stop now. Determined to continue, Maria took precautions. She relocated, kept her location private, and surrounded herself with a community that supported her. But she never let fear silence her. She went beyond just sharing her story. She created a ministry dedicated to helping others who wanted to leave the monastic life but didn't know where to turn. She provided resources, guidance, and a safe space for those who felt trapped by religious systems that no longer aligned with their faith. Her message was clear. Faith is about a relationship with God, not about man-made rules. But Maria knew that the battle wasn't over. She was up against centuries of tradition, institutions with immense power, and a culture that often resisted change. And yet, she stood firm. She had once been bound by fear, by ritual, by the weight of expectations. Now, she was free, and she wanted others to experience that same freedom. Her story became more than just a personal testimony. It became a movement that challenged people to seek the truth for themselves, to break free from the chains of tradition, and to discover a faith that was based on God, not on human institutions. But with so much opposition, could Maria's message truly make a lasting impact, or would the forces against her succeed in silencing her? What do you think? Should religious institutions have the power to dictate how people practice their faith? Or should faith be a personal journey free from rigid traditions? Let us know in the comments. And if you've been inspired by Maria's story so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful stories like this one. Stay tuned, because what happens next will shock you. Maria had stepped into a storm she hadn't fully anticipated. As her story spread, more and more people reached out, sharing their own struggles with faith, tradition, and the institutions that had shaped their beliefs. Some were current nuns or priests who, like her, had doubts but were too afraid to voice them. Others were ordinary believers who had always sensed something was missing but never had the courage to question it. But with the support came resistance, fierce, relentless, and sometimes dangerous. At first, it was just words. Online attacks from religious groups calling her a heretic, accusing her of misleading people, claiming she was being used by forces that wanted to destroy the church. Then came direct warnings from former convent members, urging her to stop before she did something she would regret. Some even tried to appeal to her emotions, sending messages filled with sorrowful pleas. "Come back before it's too late. We can still forgive you." Forgive her? For what? For thinking? For asking questions? The turning point came when Maria received an unexpected message from someone still inside the convent she had left. It was a young woman, let's call her Anna, who had heard Maria's story and felt a deep connection to it. Anna had been having similar doubts for months, but was terrified of speaking up. "I don't know what to do," Anna wrote. "If I say anything, they'll isolate me. I feel like I'm suffocating." Maria knew this fear all too well. She had once been in Anna's shoes, stuck between loyalty and the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. She assured Anna that she wasn't alone, that there was a life beyond those walls if she ever chose to leave. But just days later, Anna's messages stopped. At first, Maria thought maybe she was just afraid to continue talking. But then, a chilling email arrived, this time from an anonymous sender. "Stop interfering. You don't understand what you're doing. Some things are meant to remain unquestioned." That was the moment Maria realized just how deep this resistance went. It wasn't just about differing opinions. It was about control. Control over what people believed. Control over their access to information. Control over the fear that kept them obedient. And that's when Maria knew she couldn't stop. Determined to help others who felt trapped, she expanded her efforts. She created a private support group where people questioning their faith could talk freely without fear of judgment. She connected with former priests, nuns, and theologians who had studied the same doubts she had encountered. Together, they created resources to help people understand that faith wasn't about blindly following a system, it was about knowing God personally. But the backlash intensified. Maria's family, devout and traditional, pleaded with her to stop. They didn't understand why she was doing this. To them, she was betraying everything they had ever believed in. Some relatives even refused to speak to her, convinced that she had lost her way. And then there was the growing threat of real danger. One evening, Maria returned to the place where she had been staying to find that someone had tampered with her front door. It was a subtle warning. Nothing was stolen, nothing was damaged, just a clear sign that someone had been there, that she was being watched. Was she in physical danger? Would people go that far to silence her? The thought terrified her, but fear had already stolen too much of her life. She wasn't going to let it win again. Instead, she doubled down. She started traveling, speaking in communities that had been affected by religious control. She met people whose lives had been shattered by institutions that prioritized obedience over truth. Women who had been silenced, men who had been cast out, families torn apart because they dared to question traditions. Each story fueled her mission even more. But Maria also knew she had to be wise. The more visible she became, the more opposition she attracted. She had to be careful, strategic, and above all grounded in the truth she had come to know. One of the biggest revelations she shared was that blind faith wasn't faith at all. Faith isn't about following rules to avoid punishment, she would say. It's about a relationship with God, one that isn't defined by human institutions. This message resonated with many, but it also angered those who had built their authority on the idea that obedience to religious structures was the only way to please God. One day, she was invited to a live debate against a well-known religious leader who had publicly criticized her. He accused her of misleading people, of spreading confusion. "You are tearing apart the foundations of the church," he argued. "If people start questioning everything, where does it end?" Maria took a deep breath. "The truth doesn't fear questions," she responded. "If something is truly from God, shouldn't it stand up to scrutiny?" The audience was silent. This was the core of Maria's message. Real faith could withstand questions. It didn't need to be protected by threats, guilt, or fear. The debate went viral. Millions watched as Maria stood her ground, calmly dismantling arguments that had been used for centuries to keep people from thinking for themselves. But with visibility came even greater risk. The threats escalated. Anonymous emails turned into real warnings. She started receiving messages saying that she was playing with fire, that she was risking her life. Some even accused her of being manipulated by forces trying to destroy Christianity. But Maria never attacked faith itself, only the systems that distorted it. She continued her work, undeterred. Then, one day, she received another message from Anna, the young woman still inside the convent. "I'm ready to leave," Anna wrote, "but I'm afraid." This was it. Maria had a choice. She could step back, knowing the risks, or she could help Anna and others like her find their way out. She knew what she had to do. But would helping Anna finally push Maria past the point of no return? What do you think? Should people be free to question their faith, even if it means leaving behind everything they've ever known? Or is there danger in questioning too much? Let us know in the comments. And if Maria's journey has kept you hooked, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share stories that challenge the status quo and spark real conversations. Stay tuned, because the next part of Maria's story will take an even more shocking turn. Maria read Anna's message over and over again. "I'm ready to leave, but I'm afraid." She knew exactly what that fear felt like. The fear of stepping into the unknown. The fear of losing everything: community, security, identity. It wasn't just about walking out of a building. It was about unlearning everything you had been taught to believe was sacred. For a moment, Maria hesitated. If she helped Anna, she was crossing a line. It wasn't just about speaking out anymore. It was about action. The risks were higher than ever. But Maria also knew that if she didn't help, Anna might never find the courage to leave. So she replied, "You don't have to do this alone." For the next few days, they communicated in secret. Anna was terrified of being caught. If the convent found out she was even considering leaving, they would do everything in their power to stop her. Maria had heard stories of women being placed under constant surveillance, locked away in isolation, or manipulated into staying through psychological and spiritual guilt. Anna had no money, no plan, and nowhere to go. Maria reached out to her growing network, former religious members who had also left and were willing to help others do the same. They found a safe place where Anna could stay once she was out. Now, all she had to do was leave. The night Anna planned to escape, Maria could barely sleep. Every second felt like an eternity. She kept checking her phone, waiting for a message, waiting for proof that Anna had made it. Then finally, it came. "I did it. I'm out." A wave of relief washed over Maria, but she knew this was just the beginning. When Anna finally arrived at the safe house, she was shaken. She hadn't expected it to be so terrifying. She was filled with doubt, questioning whether she had done the right thing. "What if I made a mistake?" Anna asked, tears in her eyes. What if this was the only place where I belonged? Maria understood. Leaving didn't instantly erase years of conditioning. It didn't suddenly make everything clear. The journey of unlearning and rediscovering faith was long, painful, and uncertain. But Maria reminded her of something important. God doesn't live inside walls. He isn't locked in a building. You are free to seek him on your own terms now. Anna stayed silent, letting the words sink in. Over the next few weeks, she slowly adjusted to her new reality. The outside world felt overwhelming at first. So many choices, so much freedom, so much uncertainty. But for the first time in her life, she was making her own decisions. Maria guided her through the transition, just as others had guided Maria when she first left. And Anna wasn't alone. More and more people began reaching out, nuns, priests, and deeply religious believers who had started questioning the structures they had dedicated their lives to. But not everyone saw Maria as a savior. News of Anna's escape spread quickly. The convent was furious. They issued statements condemning those who led others astray, warning that rebellion against God's chosen institutions was a grave sin. And then, Maria received a message she never expected. A senior member of her former convent requested a meeting. At first, Maria wasn't sure if it was a trap. Would they try to manipulate her into silence? Threaten her? Or was there a possibility, no matter how small, that they were actually willing to listen? After careful consideration, she agreed. The meeting was arranged in a neutral location, a small cafe in a quiet part of the city. Maria arrived early, her heart pounding. When the woman walked in, Maria was stunned. It was someone she had once admired deeply, a mentor, a woman who had taught her how to pray, how to sacrifice, how to devote herself completely. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, finally, the woman broke the silence. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice filled with pain. "Why are you trying to destroy what we've built?" Maria took a deep breath. "I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm trying to help people find the truth for themselves." The woman shook her head. "But they already have the truth. It's here, in the church. It's in obedience. What you're doing is dangerous. Dangerous." Maria had heard that word so many times before. "Is it dangerous to ask questions?" Maria challenged. "Is it dangerous to read the Bible and seek God without layers of tradition blocking the way?" The woman's expression wavered. For just a second, Maria saw something unexpected. Doubt. "What if you're wrong?" the woman whispered. "And what if I'm right?" Maria replied. Silence. The conversation lasted for over an hour. At times it was tense, other times it was emotional. But by the end, Maria realized something. Even those who defended the institution weren't immune to doubt. Maria left that meeting more determined than ever. She had seen firsthand that the fear of questioning wasn't just among those who left, it existed within the walls of the convent too. Even those who seemed the most devoted were afraid to ask, "What if?" And that fear is what kept the system alive. With each testimony she shared, with each person she helped, Maria saw the impact of breaking free from that fear. The more people learned that faith wasn't about blind obedience, but about true understanding, the more they began to seek God for themselves. But Maria also knew that not everyone was ready to hear this message. Some would fight to keep the system in place. Some would do anything to silence voices like hers, and as her movement grew, so did the danger. One night she received another anonymous warning. "You've gone too far. Stop now, or you'll regret it." For the first time in a long time, Maria felt fear creeping back in. But was it enough to make her stop, or had she come too far to turn back now? What do you think? Should questioning religious traditions be encouraged, or does it risk causing chaos? Let us know in the comments. And if Maria's journey has kept you engaged, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're just getting started, because what happens next will change everything. Maria sat in silence, staring at the warning message on her phone. "You've gone too far. Stop now, or you'll regret it." Fear tried to creep back in, the same fear that had once kept her trapped in obedience. But Maria had learned something since leaving the convent. Fear was the enemy of truth. If she backed down now, everything she had fought for, all the people she had helped, would be for nothing. She refused to be silenced. Instead of retreating, she made a decision. She would be louder. Maria doubled her efforts. She started sharing more testimonies from former nuns, priests, and believers who had broken free from systems that had kept them in spiritual bondage. She created a network for those in transition, a place where they could ask questions, share their struggles, and find real support. And then, something unexpected happened. A journalist reached out. Her story had spread beyond online communities. It was now making waves in mainstream media. The journalist wanted to interview Maria, to expose the hidden realities of religious institutions that few dared to talk about. This was an opportunity Maria couldn't ignore. The interview aired a week later. It was raw, honest, and powerful. Maria spoke openly about her journey, about the fear-based control that kept so many people from discovering a real personal faith. She shared stories of others who had felt trapped, but had finally found the courage to leave. The response was explosive. Her story resonated with thousands. People who had always felt something was wrong but never knew how to articulate it. Messages flooded in, not just from those seeking help, but from those who had secretly been questioning for years. But with the overwhelming support came an even stronger wave of resistance. Religious leaders condemned her publicly. Some called her dangerous. Others accused her of leading souls to destruction. One message stood out from the rest. "You are playing with fire. You think you are helping people, but you are only creating more confusion. Stop before it's too late." Maria took a deep breath as she read it. For some, questioning long-held traditions felt like an attack. It was easier to silence people than to face the possibility that something needed to change. But Maria wasn't here to destroy faith. She was here to set it free. And then the ultimate test came. A former friend from the convent, the last person she ever expected to reach out, sent her a message. "I don't understand what you're doing," they wrote, "but I can't ignore my own doubts anymore. I need to know, what if you're right?" Maria's heart swelled with emotion. This was why she did it, not to tear down, not to cause rebellion, but to help people ask the questions they had been too afraid to voice. To remind them that faith was never meant to be a prison. In that moment, she knew, no matter what threats came, no matter how many people opposed her, she would never stop. Because truth was worth it, freedom was worth it. And there were still so many people out there trapped in fear, waiting for someone to show them that they weren't alone. Maria's journey was far from over. She had escaped the walls of the convent, but her mission had just begun. Now, it's your turn to ask yourself, do you truly believe what you believe? Or have you just never questioned it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where you started to question everything? And if this story has made you think, don't leave without hitting that like button, subscribing, and turning on notifications. We bring you the stories that challenge the norm, open minds, and spark real conversations. Because sometimes the truth is the most dangerous thing of all.